Hello, hello, hello. Today I'm talking with Sathpal Singh. We talked about the celebration of humanity, about habits and getting things done. I'm Ivanul from Who's Agile. My pronouns are he and him. Welcome to my channel. You see a lot of agilists around me on this screen. If you want to hear me interviewing, please click that subscribe button because these are the people that I've invited so far. If you think I'm missing people, let me know in the comments. And that like button, well, if you liked today's interview, don't forget to click it.
Are you a Scrum or Agile enthusiast? Would you like to grow in your role? Or would you like to connect with peers around the world? Then the Online Scrum Master Summit is just for you. My name is Esther Schmid, and I'm the main host of this global summit. You can join us from the 17th to the 19th of June, all virtually. So join us because we have great keynotes, insightful talks, and hands-on workshops. So go to osms25.com and register for free. Looking forward to see you there.
Hello, hello, and with me I have Satpal. Is that actually how I should pronounce your name?
Yeah, Sathpal. You can call me Sath. Everybody calls me Sath.
Well, I wanted to ask. I always try to ask it on camera because I think it's really helpful for everybody to know a little bit. And one of the things that I like to do as well is try to show where we are. And I'm here in Belgium, in Ghent, and we go directly, completely to Edinburgh, if I'm correct.
You
And
are.
of course, not the exact location. And I have a couple of other friends, Vinny, Gil, and your Masraf, work living close by, I would say.
Mm.
So let's bring you back on screen. And next to that, the other thing I want to ask, I'm starting, it's here 20 minutes before 7 in the evening. What's the time on your side?
So it's five-ish for me. So it's 20 to 6. So I'm only an hour behind you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's one time zone away. And well, we're crossing borders in a way. From Europe to not Europe, but let's not go into that
No,
discussion
don't
because
don't 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 do that.
because that's a whole different kind of thing. That makes things a lot harder if you want to travel to each other's countries, I would say, which used to be so much easier back so many years ago.
It's
But
it's
anyway,
it's it, it's still okay. Well, we met last year at XP Benelux, so that was cool.
exactly.
Yeah, it was good. Yeah, although we did take
Um,
the train.
right. Well, Satpal, before we jump into the questions, what do you want people to know about you?
Oh, I would want people to know about me. Intro. So I was joking recently I was at a conference in Scotland. It was in the Scottish voluntary sector, and I was on a panel, and it came to me, and we were all introducing ourselves, all the panelists, and I jokingly said, one of the things we all least enjoy doing is introducing ourselves. I don't know whether you feel the same way. I still find it very difficult to do that, not least because I wear many hats. So, I'm involved in lots of different things, and then I'm always thinking about, where should I focus, where should I put emphasis, and where would I not put emphasis, and so that's always quite a challenge for me. I would like people to know, well, I'm in Scotland, as you said. I'm a proud Scottish Sikh. We might come back to that. I often say these days I sit at the intersection of agile engineering and community development. That's kind of the intersection of really what I'm kind of involved in. Obviously, when I say engineering, I mean software. I'm not building bridges and things like that. My background is all software, so I started out as a software engineer long time ago now. I studied computer science, and I'm in my well in my third decade. I know you wouldn't think it to look at me, but I am well in my third decade. So I have a technology background, but I've done many roles in many sectors. I've worked in the public sector, the private sector, banking. I've had energy clients. I've basically worked with, I've had many international clients and worked with a number of global brands, like many of us have. So I've built up my kind of experiences that way. I've had many different roles. A lot of technology leadership roles, engineering director, headed up digital teams, built these teams, and throughout that various sort of agile roles too. But these days I'm predominantly, I would say, certainly from the agile side of things, because I do various things, mostly in the product side. So I do some product ownership, I do a lot of product coaching. And I still do a lot of sort of agile coaching bits and pieces, but I'm also an engineering lead, so multiple hats as I mentioned. So yeah, all of that keeps me very busy. I'm also what I would call a serial volunteer. So very,
Serial volunteer. I
yeah.
was worried what would come after the word serial.
I did wonder. You did have a worried look on your face for a second. So I have various voluntary roles. I've been very, I'm very committed to that. I do believe, voluntary roles are a great way for us to grow personally, which also can support our professional growth and what we can bring back into our organisations. I have a number of different roles, but primarily I'm currently the chair of the Agile Method Specialist Group. So that's the British Computer Society. So they're if you don't know, they're the professional body, UK professional body for tech. Though they do have a global membership of, I don't know what it is now, 60 odd thousand members. So that's one of the things I do, and I also the organizer of a global meetup called the Future Work Scotland. So anybody who follows me actively on LinkedIn will regularly see me posting about upcoming sessions, people who are talking, sharing recordings of the session. Not too dissimilar to what you do here. Personally, I married, 3 kids. My kids are a little bit older now. And yep, I say I do karate. I did karate. So I did karate for a while. I've kind of drifted away from that just with time commitment. God, that's it. What else would I say? That's probably more than enough, right?
Well, I was about to say, for someone who doesn't like to introduce himself, you have quite a nice introduction. I wanted
Okay.
to say that the one thing I dread more over introducing myself is introducing others, because
Right.
I might pick out other parts that you might think are no longer important, or that you don't want to talk about, or maybe are important but you feel embarrassed about it, whatever.
Got you.
And I prefer that people, do it, even if I know it's it's dreadful. I typically don't warn people upfront about it, because it's also okay if people just introduce them very shortly or long. But it's, again,
Agreed.
it tells us a little bit about who we are. Um, and
Nice.
indeed, it's, it is part of when people come here. A lot of people might know you already, and a lot of others might not know you, and that's what you introduce and what you say. I love the fact that you add the full package. Like, okay, there is that work, there is that personal life, there even was some hobby, but okay, it's abandoned, but it's still part a little bit of who you are, even if you're not doing it at this particular moment. It still is an important part of your personality, I guess, or it was
Yeah.
at some point.
Yeah.
So I like that part. That would definitely not be something I would have figured out or said. And so then again, by you bringing it, it brings a much more personal touch. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for being here indeed. Because, like you said, we've met at XP Days. You've been invited by Joe, if I remember correctly. And so it's very nice to have that conversation, because actually we met when I met Joe as well. So
Yes.
so that was kind of nice, and really, well, everybody who's been to XP knows how interesting the late night bar conversations are. So we're not going to go too much into detail.
No, let's not do that.
Uh, but they were interesting, I think, for at least for me. It really was. I made a mental note, like, okay, that's definitely a person that I want to add to my invitation list. And, well, no coincidence, I guess, that Joe immediately also invited you. So I was really happy when you accepted
Nice.
it. So here we are. Let's jump into that very first question. What is something that people usually don't know about you, but has influenced you in who you are?
That's a lovely question.
Thank
Oh,
you.
so I guess the thing that a lot of people don't know about me is I have what I would call an artistic past and background. So as a young child, I was very artistic. That was my passion. So I used to draw and paint all the time. That's kind of what I was interested in. But not just drawing paint, I'd do the whole works, right? I used to do pastels, charcoals, I'd play with different mediums basically. I
Hmm.
was really into it. My parents used to say it was my gift. So I was young, I used to draw a lot, I used to win a lot of art competitions at school and things like that.
Whoa,
And I
at that
didn't,
kind of level. So it's not
well,
just being at home, but even in competitions.
yeah, well, school competitions and things like that. I did go to a night class. I was quite young, so that was quite an interesting
Hmm.
experience because my dad was encouraging about it all, which was really
Hmm.
cool. But he sort of managed to sign me up to this sort of evening class. I was quite young. I went along, and obviously everybody was a lot older than me. In many cases, they were quite elderly because they were probably retired or semi-retired, and it was quite.
Yeah.
And I used to sit there and just paint and draw. And they'd come over and they'd be really complimentary, and it was really quite lovely. But I mean, I would have been, I don't know, to be honest, 8, maybe 9, 10, 10 at the most, maybe. So quite young. But the thing is, what I've always found is because I was artistic, I'm naturally very, I guess, creative in different ways. So I've continued to kind of use that creativity, and I find it comes into my work quite a lot. You've probably had others on here who are, graphic recorders and, do visualization. So I do bits of that, I do vocabulary. I don't use it extensively in my work, but it is in my arsenal, which I think is quite helpful. And I do believe in, I'm very visual in what I see as well. So when I'm doing my own talks, my slides and packs do tend to be very visual in nature. And also because I'm a bit of a film geek, I always like weave in sort of film references and things into lots of my talks. So that's kind of really something folk would know. And also last year, some people would have seen it on LinkedIn. I did end up helping an ex-colleague of mine illustrate a book, which I never expected I would do. So I think I have it here somewhere.
Okay.
If I'm
So
allowed to show it to you. So I don't know if you can see that.
there is no I in IT.
Yes, so you'll see me there. I wrote a foreword, but I also did the illustrations for it. So there you go. I found a way to get back to and revisit my childhood passion.
And is that something that you proposed yourself to help out with, or is that person asked you to do
Yeah,
that?
Erin,
Or
Erin actually reached out to me because he'd seen I'd done some other visualization stuff and said, "Obviously, you've done that sort of thing. I like what I've seen. Would you like to work on this project with me?" But I think what was really good about it wasn't just that I was illustrating things. It was the way that he and I collaborated on the book because we did it in a very sort of agile manner. I set up the sort of Kanban system of work, being very sort of wedded to that good flow of work. But it was very truly collaborative, right? I was reading chapters of his book, creating some sort of concept to kind of bring that to life, and then sharing it with him, moving the the work through the board. He'd then give me feedback, and based on that feedback, I'd iterate, right? So it was a genuine example of doing that well, and it worked really well. And more often than not, he was happy about producing. But there were occasions where whatever I produced didn't work for him. So
yes,
and it was great. I loved it. And when it didn't work, I liked it because then I'd want to understand what was it he wasn't getting about the concept I proposed based on what I'd read, and then I'd iterate on it, and then we got through it, and it was good. It was a lovely process that only really lasted maybe 3-4 months. I would have thought.
and by then his book was already finished, or was he still writing it while you were starting to draw, or how did
No,
that work?
no, that's a good point. So no, he'd written a lot of it and actually had it proofread, etc. So when I started to produce the artwork, once he was happy with the concept and effectively signed it off, he would then incorporate it in and put it into situ, and then we would look at it again to see whether it worked well or not. So he'd
Right.
already written a lot of it, and we'd agreed to do it that way because once he'd written it, he'd shared drafts of the chapters, and then I was reading them, and then as one does, I'm kind of then applying my sort of visual thinking, right? To how do
Right.
I want to how do I want to translate this into something that would support the messages that he's trying to convey, right? But the other key thing there was that we'd agreed based on the narrative that he was proposing that I would put a humorous slant on it. So every visual that I did that supported his chapters was deliberately intended to be a little bit tongue in cheek, a little bit funny, make the point, but do it in, a subtly humorous kind of way.
And that's really for me what drawings or anything that is added to a book should do. It should, yeah, make you reflect a little bit on what you just read and say,
Mm,
why is that drawing here? What
yes.
does it make me think? And if it's funny, it's like, okay, it for me it's like a pause while reading, and it helps you reflect a little bit on what I've just read. And if that's well done, then it really yeah, helps the book a lot and helps me as a reader a lot. So yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
The only thing I would say is there was the visuals. It was one per chapter, and they were at the start of the chapter. So again, it was a
Oh,
deliberate way
so
to kind of draw the
so it's
reader
the
in a little
opposite.
bit.
It's
Yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
basically you first think, and it's like, what would this chapter be? And then okay, but that actually is also something I like to do in presentations. Like first ask people to think about the concept,
Mm,
and when they have something, then we go into the details, and
yes,
then you say, oh, actually it's a little bit different, and okay, and then because yeah, that usually helps me a lot. If I think already about something that's going to be presented, and then yeah, it gets my attention to what's being presented, and it gets my attention for that
yes.
next chapter then. So that's nice. Well, that's really a nice thing to know about you, and that in a way you talked about how that influenced you in some of that work and how you
Mm,
use it. Is there other ways where you see that artistic way of working is coming out even without drawing? Is that is the artist in you, or is there something you've learned by making these drawings as a young child?
that's a good question. I think it for me, it's not just about the drawing; it's about the way we communicate. It's the way we convey messages. So I tend to, I'm very motivated by good communication. And a lot of my work is also, I guess I would say, is storytelling. So I think there's a creativity to that. I think there's an artistry to that. I guess it's a bit like, I've got friends who are really into poetry. It's the same sort of thing. These are all just art forms. And I don't think it's just about drawing. It's about, like you were saying earlier, it's about how you can use these tools and techniques and these skills that we have to convey the sorts of emotion that you're hoping to conjure up in whatever the scenario may be, right? And that's kind of the way I see it, because I do a lot of sort of digital marketing sort of stuff as well. That's another dimension to me. So when I'm doing posts on the various social media platforms that I'm active on, to me that's a sort of form of art as well, but it's more through the wordsmithing, right? But to me, I think it's inherent in my creativity and my love for art, and just how we convey and communicate information in the most beautiful way that we can. So it resonates.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And well, if you learn about these kind of things already at a young age, I think it has an influence on
Hmm.
us. Even if you might not know famous artists or whatever, or famous other people who making art, you're learning it on your own.
Yeah.
And in a way, you were, well, if I understood correctly, you were surrounded by people much older, so you got different kind of things that you saw.
Hmm.
How would I say it? Not immediately linked to your childhood or to what you're thinking about as an 8-year-old. So
Hmm.
I guess it makes you think a little bit different about your
Hmm.
drawings as well.
And I think, well,
Um,
that was in the evening art class, which I only did for a period of time, and it was a sort of point in time. But again, I think you're right. I think it would have provided a level of influence in some cases at that young age. There's no way I could have possibly even have understood the influence and impact it might have had on me. But as you know, a lot of these things are about self-expression. Right, so
oh
that's
yeah,
that's a bit I really like. It's like dancing. Like I like to dance. People who know me well know I'm not I'm not shy to want to throw shapes, as we would say, but I think it's self-expression. It's
But
sort of
but
authentic to you, right?
self-expression, I think maybe it's different. But when I look at children,
Mm,
like especially age, I don't know, 8, 16, maybe even more, and at age 16, is that they're very much conscious about what the world thinks of them
yes.
and how people look at them. If you're surrounded by grown-ups, by adults who make art, I guess a lot less of these people worry about what other people think about their drawing. They just want to do something for themselves.
Yeah.
That alone as an influence might be why you're so not scared to share stuff with the world. I don't know.
Possibly.
Maybe I'm exaggerating, yeah, but
No,
that's
no,
yeah.
I genuinely never thought about it in that way, to be honest. So
Mm.
thank you for that.
Well, yeah, maybe I'm seeing things that weren't there, but it's something I see a lot when young children really worried, and I think once people are, I don't know, well, I'm 50. I really don't care a lot about what people think of how I look and others. But I guess I saw that much more in people, I don't know, after 35, 40, then you have a lot more people that say like, yo, I do this because I care about that. And if you
Mm,
think differently, well, that's your problem
yeah,
or that's you, but I'm who I am,
exactly.
which I think is a healthy way. I don't say ignore everybody else because that's not what I'm saying, of course,
No,
because there still should be some empathy, but it's really about, okay, yeah, not caring too much, or better, I would say, caring much more about what we care about than what others care about for ourselves, and which is for art, I think, really important. If you want to do that. Let's move to that second question. If you had not been doing what you've been doing now, any idea what would have become of you?
well, another great question. So I do like this question. The reason I like this question is because this question isn't one where I have to give too much thought to. The reason that's the
Mhm.
case is because we talked earlier about the art. I don't think I was ever going to go to art college, though I did consider it, and I didn't think I was going to go on to become a world famous artist. Doubtful somehow. But when I reflect on it, and I studied computer science, and was a hands-on software engineer for many years, and had various technical roles. An architect. I was a database administrator for a while. What I came to realize later in my life, and you were talking about, the journey we go on and where we get to, that, I always thought if I were going to turn the clock back and go back and study something else, I would have absolutely hands down studied psychology, because I'm actually really fascinated by people, like many of us in the agile space tend to be. And I would go quite deep into that because I'm a social animal, right? I'm an extrovert. I sort of like I get fueled by positive energy from others. So I'm enjoying this conversation. You're asking great questions. We're having a good chat. We could be sitting anywhere doing this, as far as I'm concerned. But I'm really fascinated by why people say what they say and they do what they do.
Mm.
So if I were to do something else, I would love to be doing something in the field of psychology.
And was there a moment in your life when you were trying to do that, or was that at some point something that no, it's just now that this is
It
bumping up, or
yeah.
how should I see
No,
it?
it's not bumping up. It's kind of been there. So I guess that's why I've ended up probably going on the journey that I have, because even though I was a technical person, I have a technical background. I'm always, as we've discussed, also creative. I'm quite people orientated, and I think even when I was coding and programming, but back in the day, um, I was actually much more interested in getting up and going over and talking to people and trying to make sure I understood the problem. And, naturally, because I think a lot of us ended up, working in a way which was quite akin to kind of being a business analyst of some description. So I think I was doing these things quite naturally. If you watch films like I do and you think of The Social Network, the film they made, about, Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg and that whole journey, they talked about, people being wired in and just sitting there and, churning out the code. I don't feel I was ever really one of those sorts of software engineers. I was somebody who wanted to talk to the customer, right? And, understand the problem. And like I say, work with others in the team and be very collaborative about what we were trying to do. And I think that's kind of been, a big part of my journey, which then led me into a lot of the other things I've gone on to do. I find myself in leadership management roles on the technical side kind of quite early on in my career. And I think somehow it's all interlinked.
It definitely is. The only interesting thing about this is that most people, when they think about IT people, they think about, yeah, there is these are antisocial creatures, and it's like, yeah, but that's so passé, and I'm not even sure if it ever was. And of course, there are these typical ones, and they stand out, just like we have a couple of others in all kind of industries, and maybe we have more of them. But I think we have lots of people like you, and we always had people like
Yes,
you who are interested in the whole package and in talking to customers, because otherwise IT would not have been successful if we would not have delivered things that customers liked. I
agreed.
mean, we can create all the code we like, but if we're not solving a problem,
No, agreed.
maybe the one difference that I sometimes talk about is that many of the early people that were working with computers, their peers or the people who they wrote software were typically also other engineers.
Yeah,
So they kind of understood each other, and so there was less need to have that conversation. These days, I think software is everywhere, so yeah, we definitely need people who understand customers that are not particularly the same kind of
yes,
way and thinking the same kind of way as we are. So yeah,
agreed.
definitely.
Well said. Well said.
It's but thanks for this story, because I think it's also important that we look at all these different kind of people and different kind of ways of what software engineering is. And I love that people like you bring these stories, because it's, especially if I don't know how many youngsters, and probably my daughter will roll her eyes saying, yeah, but nobody's interested from her age. But still, I hope at some point people who are interested and who are younger will understand that, hey, there is actually room for me in this, even if I'm not the code monkey that
Yes,
is just interested
absolutely.
in giving out code.
Well, we've talked for some years about cross-functional teams and folk like yourself and myself and others in our sort of sphere, and I'm very interested in inclusion, diversity, which ultimately leads to diversity of thought. And a lot of the time, what we're now being much more sort of vocal about, and the whole landscape shifted a lot since I started. When I started software, it was at the inception of the World Wide Web. I was writing software before the manifesto was written. We've come on quite a lot since then, right? And the thing is, a lot of organizations are getting better at realizing they need to build diverse teams because they serve a diverse customer base.
Yeah.
And to do that well, they need to really understand who they're trying to serve and meet the needs of, right?
Preferable, yes, because otherwise we might end up with. Well, I think both of us, everyone has seen software that we are forced to use one way or another that is
Sure.
dreadful, that we don't like, and it's very typical that a lot of people have not, that are creating the software have not talked to actual
Mm,
users and or done it in very strange. But anyway, luckily I've seen also a lot of good software where that is actually, that I really feel like, yes, they're doing it the way I really want it, and I feel as a
yes.
user appreciate it. And talking about these kind of things, these are kind of challenges. What is for you your biggest challenge, and at least the biggest challenge you want to talk openly on the internet, of course, and and why is it a good thing for you?
Oh, that's another good one. To be honest, I think one of my biggest challenges I, for me, is I'm interested in a lot of different things. So again, I'm just one of these people that I seem to have a very broad and diverse spectrum of interests, and I think it's a challenge. But to me, clearly it's something I want to turn into, a positive, right? So, what I mean by that is, I'm somebody who has naturally realized that, I have a growth mindset. I'm very open to learning. I'm continuous on this journey. I see myself as a work in progress. And I'm always looking for different things that just can maybe add another dimension to whoever I am, becoming, right? So to me, a lot of it's about, being in a sort of, temporary sort of state and then evolving and emerging into somebody else through that learning journey, right? Through the things that we do. So I do have a broad skill set. I mean, terms like polymath come up, but I don't see myself as a polymath because a polymath is someone who's, I think, good at lots of things. So naturally, there's certain things I'm better at than others, and I do have a diverse skill set. But I definitely think I'm what's the term I'm thinking of? I think it's a philomath. So philomath is someone who's interested in lots of different things. So I don't see myself. I would not like to class myself as a polymath, but I'd potentially class myself as a philomath, which is, I think, if I got my terms right, is is someone who is interested in lots of different things. And I think the other term that's used quite a lot is, I think it's the term scanner. So I do, scan Horizon quite a lot, and I'm always picking. But I think lots of people in our sorts of circles in our sphere are kind of like that, because I think to do what we do, you have to kind of have a broad, diverse skill set, right? If you're, supporting and
And a
driving
broad
transformation
curiosity,
programs.
I would say,
Yes, yeah, yeah, I think so. So hopefully
looking
that
at
makes
different
sense.
kind of things, and yeah,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
I
agreed.
recognize that. Definitely something that feels really interesting. Yeah, that um, and was there because now you almost immediately started to focus on why is it a good thing? Was
Yes.
it at some point the what's the challenge about that about this?
So I give you a funny story. So I remember way back when I was doing my degree, and you do all your modules, etc., your assignments, and then you do your dissertation, right, or your thesis, or whatever the terminology I think the unis would use. And I remember working on mine, and I couldn't even tell you exactly what it was now, but I distinctly remember spending far too much time just getting excited about new sources of information that could potentially support what I was trying to do, because I was always, looking for things and finding things. And as you say, I'm naturally a curious person. So I would see something, go, oh, I wonder how that fits, and that could be interesting. But then that went on for quite a long time. And I remember sitting with my tutor, whoever was assigned to, supporting me with this stage of the program, and he basically called out and said, I think you've spent too much time researching, and you need to
Need to
move to,
focus and you need
yeah,
to finish.
you need to move to the next phase, right? And I'm like, okay. Yeah, so honestly, that just randomly popped into my head when you asked me that question. But yes, that's probably an example from decades ago, but I think it's relevant nonetheless.
Yeah, I can. But you did manage to finish it then.
Oh yeah, yeah, we got it. Yeah, it got done. But I just remember that conversation sitting in his office, and you reminded me of it because I was enjoying
The
I
research so
guess the
much.
discovery process, right?
Yeah.
But I think I overcooked it.
Well, you learned something from that experience, and apparently your person that was helping you or supporting you, actually was good in supporting you because he basically told like, okay, maybe you spent a little
let's
bit
let's move on.
too
Yeah,
much
my
time.
supervisor.
Uh,
That's the word I'm looking for.
Supervisor,
Supervisor.
indeed.
Yes.
Um, I guess at the same time, yeah, how do you know if you've never created that? How would you know if you spend enough? I can imagine that many people in your situation would do the same thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
for multiple kind of reasons. It could be just because you're interested, but it could also be like I might have some kind of perfectionism and
Mm.
do I have enough? And I don't know. I've never done it. And again, this is why feedback is so important.
Yeah.
having someone who's there who can tell you like, okay, maybe that part you're ready to move to the next phase.
Yeah,
Um,
we all need people like that in our lives, right? I mean, I'm not a perfectionist, just to be
mm.
clear on that. I understand that
No,
that
no. For me,
yeah,
it's a different kind of way of that might end up in the same problem,
I got you.
and that is something that I can imagine many people when they go to that phase. Like, how do you know when it's enough?
Yes, yeah, yeah. I do know when
That's
enough's enough.
why you
Yeah,
need your supervisor to tell you like, okay, this is enough. Let's start writing.
yeah,
And yeah, come to conclusions, and because the research is
yeah,
well, I can imagine it's very tempting for people to keep on researching,
yeah.
and then
Mm.
20 years later still not having delivered anything. So yeah, that's
I don't know. I should probably never start a PhD. Is that what you're telling me?
I have never started one, so I have no idea. It might be yeah, how would I say it? It might be that now with all your experience, you're so much better at that it actually
Hmm.
you would ace it. So um, I'm just worried for people who are afraid of feedback, and who are, yeah, I've known some people say, no, I don't need, yeah, that's supervisor, that's cool for other people but not for me, and moving on, and not thinking about, okay, this person could help us in all kind of
Hmm.
directions. And that is, I think, so important for people
Yeah,
to do that.
yeah. Good call out.
Let's move to that next question. And well, for me, what I've noticed it with, I think, almost everybody that I've invited, there is a lot of passion, there is a lot of drive. I've noticed that, well, I talked a little bit about that discussion or that conversation in the bar at XP Day Benelux. That for me was also, there was a lot of passion there. And so, do you know where that drive is coming from?
Yeah, lots of places I would have said. I guess we've already explored
Hmm.
various aspects of, I guess my past, and we're all on that journey. And you were talking earlier about, you know, sort of sometimes you come to the realization later, and I quite like that. I think it's nice to be the sorts of ages we are. I think we're probably similar sort of age, and I like it because I think you become more reflective. And I'm somebody who has been on that journey of, I guess, self-awareness and self-reflection. I really believe that the best leaders are those who are self-aware and know what their strengths are and know what they're not so good at, so they try to get people who can plug those gaps, right? So thinking about the various leadership roles I've had and all the leaders that I've met on my journey, but I think there's lots of things that drive me, but I think primarily it's that sort of, I call it the quest for mastery, right?
Mm.
But to me, and that, I think that's kind of a big part of who I am. But the point is, in my view, you were talking about perfectionism earlier, right? So it's the quest, right? It's you never. I don't expect to ever really master anything, and I don't also like the word expert. If somebody calls me an expert, people have called me expert on different things. I don't really like that because I think we're always learning in things, and there's always more to learn. But I think the important bit is the pursuit, right? It's the pursuit of excellence, right? And that's one of the things that really drives me. You talked about communication. I'm somebody who really tries to pride myself on getting the communication right. So we've already talked about storytelling. We've talked about the role that creativity plays, the role that narrative plays, and various forms of art, etc., that might inspire what we're trying to do. But it is that pursuit and quest for mastery. And I think a lot of it goes back to, again, to my childhood, because, I'm the oldest of my siblings. So there's quite a lot of expectation on me, also in my culture. Also, I was the oldest grandchild on my mother's side. So my mother was also the oldest of her siblings, and they had bigger families back then. So I think there was quite a lot of expectation on me, and I've always tried to be, a sort of guiding light for, my siblings, as the oldest brother. And there's quite a lot of things that have happened over the years where, I find myself naturally stepping in. So I think all these things shape you, right? They sort of drive you, they fuel you. I like to support others where I can, like, pay it forward. So I do a lot of coaching, I do a lot of mentoring, and I love it, right? I absolutely love it. I love to see other people grow, right? It gives me huge sort of satisfaction. So, yeah, do with what you will. I know I've said quite a lot there. I'll let you reflect on that.
Yeah, but there is a lot. I was thinking, where do I want to fit in, or where do I want to add? But it's yeah, like you say, it's kind of reflecting on a lot of what we talked
Mm,
about earlier as well. The yeah, everything that is around passion. We see it in so many places, I would say, and that kind of ties into a lot what we've been talking about
yeah,
earlier on
yeah.
as well. It's the yeah, it's but that's why I love this question so much, because
Mm,
it goes in all kind of directions with many people, and at the same time, I wouldn't say it's always the same, but it's
mm,
it's recognizable for so many people on what we're discussing and what we're talking about. So that is a nice thing to actually see. I like that
mm,
that passion shows up and that drive shows up and links actually.
yeah.
For me, it's kind of, well, I wouldn't say closing question, but it links a lot of the things that you talked about before. Um, and with drive, typically there comes sometimes, not always, achievements. And so, what is your biggest achievement? And what I've noticed when I ask this question, there is actually, this is basically a moment to be proud and to be really like, okay, brag a little bit even about yourself. Is that easy for you, Satpal, to brag about yourself?
No, no, it's really not, and I think it's multifaceted, that one. So I don't, I don't know how others have fared with this one. Obviously, what some of your past episodes, but I think this is quite a difficult question for a lot of us to try to tackle,
It
because I
is.
don't, I don't. For years, I was doing things and achieving things, and I've actually got, you can't see them, like various certificates and things on my office wall, but behind me that are not visible to you. But I'm always doing things, and there are lots of accomplishments in there. And I know deep down I've been fortunate and privileged enough to have done a lot of great things, achieved a lot of great things. I was talking there about the book that I helped illustrate. I've done various things in industry, and I've been lucky enough to, do various talks and the keynotes and whatnot. But I don't stop. I think a lot of us find it hard to stop and to praise ourselves, right? And I think culturally that's a thing too. So, I grew up in quite an environment where, there was a lot of expectation. Like I said, I was being pushed quite a lot and, encouraged. Education was important. So I was always trying to, set the bar high, but also lead by example, as I mentioned. So I do struggle with it. And again, I'm one of these people. I'm not. A lot of my friends will tell you that, some of them you've had on this podcast. I've not always been brilliant with praise. So I'm certainly not. I'm not great at blooming. The scenarios we do it, but I think we often do it from a defensive position. So, if you find yourself in a situation where maybe somebody says something negative to you, or you feel attacked in some way, then I think sometimes it's human nature, we do it, but we do it as a defense mechanism. But the thing I was reflecting on, the thing I probably would talk about, just because I think it was such a meaningful thing, and this is an agile, it's an agile podcast that you're doing here, is when I was part of the team that were, architecting the Agile 20 Reflect Festival. So a lot of people know about it. It was very visible on LinkedIn. So I was one of the sort of the architects of that, alongside other friends, people, many in the Agile global community would know, Scott Sevry, Carl Smith, many others, and a bunch of us were in Edinburgh, but we created a globally diverse team. And we also got a lot of, others who are well known, people who were probably in your original book, in your early episodes, who basically put their voice behind it and backed us. And, we had a group of, would it be 12 or 15 patrons? And one of the things I was doing was liaising with them. So that was people like, Alistair Coburn, Ari Van Bennekom, Lisa Atkins. He's over the years become a friend of mine. And Dana Larson, Esther Derby, and they really backed us. But what we did was we wanted to create this sort of platform where we could surface and celebrate Agile. And it was reaching its 20th anniversary. And we spent a lot of 2020, building this, creating it, engaging with various communities. And it was through that that I really, I guess, built my friendships across the global community, even places like South America, Africa. I was at Agile Africa 2 years ago. I did a keynote there. That came as a consequence of those relationships. But we never really appreciated what it was going to grow into. And it grew into this really, great thing. And although it was a celebration of Agile, what a lot of us came to realize that it was actually a celebration of humanity, because it was at the time where a lot of us suffered quite a lot as a consequence of the global pandemic, right? So 2020 was
Yeah,
really hard, right, for many of us. A lot of us were, and when we did all this, we started to realize people were appreciating the work we were doing to connect people, and it was in the backdrop of COVID, so there was a lot going on for people, and I think it did turn into a celebration of humanity. Over the month of February 2021, when it reached the 20th anniversary, over 800 events took place globally. Over
yeah.
800 over
That's
that month.
impressive. And
Yeah,
yeah, I was, to be clear, I was one of the participants. And
so you
just
remember.
until 5 minutes ago, I didn't know you were part of the organizing team.
I was.
So,
I was.
but I was, yeah, it was really, and it inspired, at least in the company I was working on, working for, it inspired also to create our own internal event.
Yes.
It was something that was kind of already on the back of the mind of a couple of people to say, let's
Mm.
create an agile internal conference.
Yeah.
But your event triggered, was the immediate, how would I say, yeah, trigger to start doing it. Like, hey, this is maybe the moment to do something internally as well. And then we invited both external and internal people to talk about that.
And
And yeah.
over that month, I attended 50 events, and I spoke at 6, 7 of them. I hosted about 18, 20 of them. So I could never ever see myself trying to replicate such an experience, because basically I was literally working around the clock, and this was over and above a day job, right? So this was something, again, we were volunteers, we came together to do it, we really tried to embrace agile values. But a lot of people, they brought their energy to it,
Hmm.
and I think
Yeah,
it was an
exactly.
incredible. And I'm glad to hear you participated in that, because that's all we were trying to do. We simply created the platform that enabled it, and then it kind of snowballed in a way that we never expected. So that's probably something I would definitely say I'm proud of having been involved in, and a lot of good things have happened since. But
Hmm.
yeah.
And yeah, it's, I recognize also on a meta level what this brings is that the people who organize communities, who help
Mm.
create or facilitate some conversation, they happen to learn much broader their own network, and learn to, yeah, I wouldn't say advantage of it, but at
Yeah.
the same time, you learn more people, you grow your own network, you grow your own knowledge about things. And that's, yeah, something I've been seeing for 20 years, that the people who are investing in these kind of things, even if it's local or global, it doesn't
Mm.
matter. It creates so much more, yeah, passion around these things, and that is actually making people connecting.
Yes.
And of course, uh, it's nice that there are many big agile names there, but 800 events are not happening because of
No.
because of some big agile names. It also happens because there's a large community who
Correct.
really felt like, hey, this is where I want to be, and that want to learn, and yeah, to be
And I think,
participating.
yeah, and I think the point you made there is the one that I focus on, because we connected into communities across South America and Africa, places where traditionally you wouldn't think of as the places where there was agile, because there's Europe, there's ourselves, the UK, there's obviously the US, but what we learned through the relationships that we built, and the work that we did and all the events that took place, was in some parts of the world, genuinely, communities were using agile to solve really important, humanitarian problems. For most of us, our backgrounds in agile come from being in software. But now we've learned, and we knew that because I remember others talking about it some years ago. We're seeing agile being applied much more broadly, and that's what I like. I use it, in various aspects of my life, because I think it's that ubiquitous now.
Yeah, I have a double feeling. I fully agree when I hear you talk about it. At the same time, I sometimes see people applying agile in ways like, okay, because it's a buzzword, let's also use it. And it sometimes feels like people don't understand agile and then are going to apply it somewhere else. If people are really understanding it, then I fully agree with you.
Agreed.
It's really helpful, especially when you talk about the problems of the world, transparency. A lot of the agile values help really well. The feedback loops and all of that. It's really wonderful. So I do believe in it. And at the same time, I've seen it also in companies abused in ways that I'm sometimes saying, yeah, okay, it's not because that part worked agile that the rest of the part is then, yeah, I don't know. Sometimes it feels wrongly abused,
Yes,
mostly
agreed.
by people who don't understand it.
We
So
don't
that's
understand it.
yeah, exactly. So that's a little bit the risk. That said, yeah, I love what you did, and so that achievement. Let me try something. I
Well,
haven't done it
well,
much because it's not
many of
always.
us were involved. No, no, no. Much like I think
Still,
what some of
still,
the
still. Let me
manifesto
try.
authors would say. It was a hugely collaborative global effort.
All right. So yeah, that's why I thought let's have some applause or some things there. Um, we talked about what drives you. We talked about your biggest achievement so far, because of course, I still hope you achieve bigger things in the rest of your life. But well, for that, we'll talk again in 20 years,
I was
maybe,
going to say,
hopefully.
let's chat again sometime.
Well, Linda Rising was the. I spoke with her. I think she was 82 when I spoke with her. So there's still options for in 20 years to talk
Beautiful.
again. Still have lots of other people to talk to. If I'm past that list, I can restart in 20 years. So maybe. Anyway, let's move to that next question. What is a personal agility tip that you would like to share?
Oof, I don't know. I don't know if I would come up with anything that you haven't heard before. I don't know. I don't know if I would.
I haven't the answer. The question is not let's bring a completely new personal agility tip.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
just a
No, that's
personal
true.
agility tip.
So I've quite, yeah. I like the whole personal agility thing, because really it's about, to me anyway, it's about figuring out how you can perform at your best, right? How you can, get things done and achieve what you want to achieve. And there's lots of different. In fact, I was on a different podcast. I can't remember when. Sometime last year, and I was talking about some of this actually. The question wasn't framed as a personal agility question, obviously, but it was about. To me, a lot of it's about habits, right? So ultimately, we want to be able to respond well to change. We want to be able to get things done. I am definitely one of these people who likes to, visualize things. We talked earlier on about, my artistic background and, Kanban and various things we've touched on. But, I use a range of tools, but I think it's about enabling yourself to, I guess, have effective individual mobility, right? So, for example, I don't know if you can see it. So I got a whiteboard behind me. So, like at the weekend, I'm a morning person, and an evening person. So odd that way, right? Night owl. I sort of dip in the afternoons, right?
So you
So
sleep in the afternoon, but everything else you work.
so
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 some
so I
people,
might
yeah.
rest or slow down or something, but I definitely dip. So my dream is to, buy a beautiful home in Spain somewhere and retire there. It's not going to happen, but one can but dream, right? But the point is, on the weekends, like I'll get up and like just write a list of stuff on the whiteboard, which is my top priority things that I want to accomplish over the weekend. For work, I start my day with a ritual I call prep the day, which is that, I use my calendar to drive it. But what I do is I just write out all the things that I think are priorities for me, but I do it in a way where it's like a stream of consciousness. And what tends to happen is the things that you write are naturally going to be the things that are foremost on your mind. And the likelihood is, therefore, they are your priorities, right? Or things that you care about, things that you think you should be caring about. And I've used that for years, and it works quite well. I also use Trello, right? So I think it's important to have the good mix of tools, and I use it. I've got a life admin board. I've got one for running my meetup. I've got one for the work I do as part of the Agile Methods committee at BCS. So a number of different ones. But I think the important, I guess, if it is a tip for me, is create the right operating rhythm for yourself based on your natural rhythm. Right. So when I was talking earlier about, I'm a morning person and a night owl. So, I use those as effectively as I can. So I start early. I want to get things done. But everybody's got a different natural rhythm, right? So I think the way to really have real personal agility is to synchronize well with your natural rhythm.
I love that, and indeed, I love the fact that you mentioned that everybody has their own rhythm,
Yeah.
and somehow we live in a world that seems to I don't know, prioritize or spend more attention to the early people and ignoring the night owls. I'm definitely a night owl, but over the years, due to work, I've learned to get up early. Well, due to three kids
Try.
as well, I guess. Well, I'm pretty good at getting up. I don't snooze and anything, so I'm
Cool.
really able to get up rather early, even without much sleep. As I get older, it's a little bit harder. That I have to admit. But indeed, it's trained habit because of work, because of, like I said, the children, because they also have to get up at school early, and things like that. Um, and my natural rhythm would be much later. It's evening. It doesn't feel late for me
Yeah.
because this is the moment I start to get energy, and
Right.
conversations like this give me lots of energy. Um, but yeah, it's we live in a world where that's hardly is appreciated, and that is, again, I don't. For me, it doesn't matter if people are either early birds or night owls. It's like, what can we do in our society to give a possibility for both, and to offer that and find ways to collaborate in different kind of ways. That is where,
Agreed.
for example, remote work could work as well. If you're an idol and you maybe there is a company that starts early, but there's so much time zone away that it actually collaborates really well, and that could be a nice thing. And I think that finding that balance that works for everybody, I really, yeah, I think is something that is really important to stress out. So thank you for doing that, because
Oh, yeah.
it is important, whatever your rhythm is or whatever the rhythm for other people is. So that's
No, you played that back and summarized it beautifully. So.
and in that way, it is very unique as a tip. I don't think people talked a lot about it. I don't think anyone talked here about that.
Well, there you go.
That was
There,
again.
there was me doubting myself and then coming up with what you deem to be genuinely a tip.
And so that's really nice. So let's move to that next one, remote work. What have you learned about remote work? And let's start with the typical kind of question. Many people think that most of us learned remote work only during COVID, but did you do remote work before that?
Yeah, no, I did, because I was working in environments with geographically dispersed teams. So, you're working with people that are not physically in the same space as
Exactly.
you. So I think a lot of us in, large organizations, or certainly in our typical sorts of industries, were doing that. I think and I did talk about this previously. In fact, I wrote a few articles and things about it through various channels. So there are things online where I've contributed to these things. I think I think it just kind of it put a lot of focus on it, because organizations, you talked about the pandemic there, I talked about it earlier in a different context, it kind of forced the issue, for want of a better term. And I think organizations were having to very quickly, tear up and rewrite their operating models. So I think we were all just kind of learning. And I think that was genuinely one of the very few, actual positives that came out of those years, right? Because I lost a close family member too, so there's a lot of history with all of that for me and people close to me. But I think for me, the thing that still keeps coming up, and I'd be interested to hear what your take on this is we're still having to and should be making good working agreements with each other,
Mm.
right? So I
Yeah.
work with colleagues, and we're in different parts of the world, and I think it's important to have that conversation. Going, look, how do you like to work? How do I like to work? How do we find the sweet spot that works for us both? How do we communicate? Because I think we have to remind ourselves that you know most of us do spend a lot of our time not in face-to-face kind of environments now. And
Right.
I've talked a lot throughout this conversation about how much I value the importance of communication, and still it comes back to that for me because I don't know where it was. I think Forbes wrote an article that I read not that long ago actually, and they were talking about the fact that, and it was about communication, that most of us spend about 80 something percent of our week communicating in some way or another. So I think finding the best way to communicate is still very much the key to it all. Because like you were saying, we get distracted, you're doing something and people are pinging you on, some collaborative tool. A lot of teams, a lot of organizations use Microsoft Teams, things like that. And we get distracted a lot. We're easily distracted, through online working. Our concentration spans have just gone down and down and down. I think right now there's some reports that suggest it's like 40 something seconds and then we lose interest or our mind wanders, right? So if you're in a call with lots of people and it's a virtual kind of call or a hybrid call, I think we now have to really focus a lot on creating the kind of engaging environment where everybody's actually focused because we're constantly distracted by these things, right?
Right.
It's got quite terrible, I think. So I think that's what I keep learning, and I do like to
Mhm.
make good working agreements with those that I'm trying to work well with, especially if we're working together a lot.
Right. So when you do I understand correctly when you start working with people that you say the first conversation I have with them is a working agreement, or how should I see it?
Maybe not the very first one, but it would be an early conversation. If we're going to be
Mm.
successful working together,
Right.
what's the best way for us to work? Right. I mean, I'm one of those people that just likes to get to know people. I think it's important. You build good relationships that way, right? I think it's important to get to know each other. But I think if you're going to work with, and there are a few people I work with fairly regularly and most days on one thing or another because we're working on the same initiatives or across the same products, and they're not the same location as me. So I
Mm.
don't see them physically. I'm unlikely to find myself in a face-to-face scenario with them that often. One of them very unlikely because she's in another continent from me. So it's really
But
important
do
that
you see
we
them
talk about that.
virtually? Are the
Yes, yes,
cameras on?
yes,
Yes.
yes, yes. And to be honest, I kind of insist on that. I know it's not for
Mm.
everyone, but I think it just helps for you know a better engagement because when cameras are off, you're not getting all the clues, the visual clues and cues anyway when you're virtual. 'Cause some of them are missed, right? I mean, I could be
Hmm.
twiddling my thumbs under the desk right now, and you wouldn't know.
Exactly. You're like,
But
oh, yeah.
so yeah, I think it's still really tough. I mean, what do you think?
Hmm.
Have we
Yeah.
cracked? Have we cracked this? I don't think we've cracked this.
But for me, the remote work, it's like, well, we had, I don't know, depending on when you start thinking about physical work, what people think is always
Mm,
like, well, we've been working for centuries. No, we didn't. We started working desk work like since the Second World War, something like that. Maybe a little bit between both
mm,
wars, but really desk work and knowledge work is not that new, not that old, sorry. So we've only been doing it for maybe maximum 100 years, something like that,
mm.
and we've learned a lot of tricks along the way. But we still need to learn the remote work because that's a different kind of thing. I
Yes.
keep giving the example in when I first started working. I learned that, oh, when you drink coffee, this is a place where you meet people.
Yeah.
And someone else told me once, I was then at another company which was a lot bigger, and then they said, well, but if you go to the one floor up or one floor down, there is also another place for coffee. I was like, why would I go there? Because like coffee is around the corner. It's like, yeah, but if you go upstairs, there's another team which who we work
Exactly.
together. And if you go downstairs, there is, I don't know, the people who are taking care of whatever, or project
Mm,
managers or whatever. And it's like, oh, okay, so that's a trick that I've learned.
mm,
It's not something I did naturally. People told me that, and we don't. I think that we haven't found most of these tricks for remote work. I do think it. We will find a lot more in the next 20 to 40 years, I think.
well, that's a
And
long horizon.
yeah, but that's I can imagine that it felt for people also in the office world that, yeah, that wasn't easy in the beginning. I don't know. um yeah, there is a lot there. Like you say, cameras on, it's something that it makes huge difference. And again, I do understand where for some people it's hard, but
Mm,
it makes it a lot easier. Taking the time to connect, I don't have the feeling here that we're not connected, but we're now talking for more than an hour. We
mm,
take the time to connect with each other, and we're taking the time to know each other at a different kind of level.
mm,
And yeah, that kind of helps. And somehow it feels that we don't do that enough in companies. We don't
indeed.
take an hour or not every day, but an hour with everyone to get to know them.
Mm,
And for with some people that I need to work closely, I do want to have regularly an hour to get to learn much more about them.
nice.
So thanks for sharing some of these things,
Mm,
and your story, because like you say, I think it's also important that many people need to realize, especially the young people, like, again, this is not something we started in 2020. We already did it before. Yes, the tools were not at the same level because the tools improved a lot in the last 5 years. And still I can see improvements in a lot of the tools as
yeah,
well.
yeah, yeah.
It's lots of things there. um, let's move to that next question. What's a book you want to talk about
Oh,
that you have
book,
read?
book, book, book. Like I could talk about lots of books, as I'm sure could many of your guests. So
Yes, exactly.
I did a, I can't remember when it was. I think it might have been earlier this year. So I did do a post on LinkedIn, which was about the books that I felt most influenced and inspired my 2024. So there is a post
Mhm.
out there on LinkedIn for anyone who's active there.
I'll try to add it,
Yeah,
and it
yeah,
would be
yeah.
nice if you could send it to me.
Yeah, I can definitely
But
share a link to that. But the one I would definitely call it, there's a few I would probably just touch upon for different reasons, and again, very much related to a lot of what you and I have covered in this conversation. But the one that would always jump out for me is the courage to be disliked, and it's a, you know,
that's
it's
the
a bit,
book.
yeah, it's a bit people know, and I kind of stumbled on it by chance really because I started really getting into audiobooks. It's not something I ever thought I would, and then it appeared somewhere as a suggestion, and it was one of those things. I was very quickly drawn to. I was curious about the title. Going, God, should be why would anybody want to be disliked? I wonder what the what the message is here. So I got it on Audible, but it happened at a time where I was going through some personal stuff and I wasn't in a great place. And the book really helped me. It really kind of inspired me. I don't know. Do you know it? Do you know the book?
No, the
No. Okay.
title really is inspiring to
Yes.
read,
Yeah.
because it's, yeah. But tell me, why should I read it?
So basically, it's actually about, the whole book is built around this conversation between a student and a philosopher. But during this conversation, basically the student, again, not doing particularly well, struggling, kind of challenge, beating themselves up quite a lot, is a phrase I guess I would use, and having challenges around the relationships with people. But what actually happens is over the course of this conversation, the philosopher starts to dispel some of these false notions that the student has about relationships and themselves, but whilst doing that, introduces and teaches that through the work of Adler. So Alfred Adler, who was a lesser known, famous sort of psychoanalyst, as a psychologist. Everybody knows Freud and everybody knows, Carl Jung. But um, Adler's work was just as pioneering as their work. So it was Adler who basically pioneered individual psychology, and this stuff started to really blow my mind. And I've written a talk based on this. So the talk I've got a talk called "Getting into a Flow State with Adlerian Psychology." So in this talk, I actually talk about, that background. I set the context around, my situation. I give more detail around it, and then obviously I stumbled across this book by mistake. I mean, I've got an actual copy of it somewhere in my shelves behind me, but I've listened to the audio version a few times because it's a beautiful conversation. But through that, you learn a lot about, because Adler talked a lot about the fact that all problems are actually interpersonal relationship problems. So it's a very human centric kind of look at these things. It's something a lot of us can relate to. He talked about, how we should, basically put ourselves first sometimes, and not in a selfish way, but self-caring kind of way. Be kind to yourself. Things that are very common now in the literature of, self-help kind of books. But this is quite old now, and I think it's fantastic. And a lot of it did resonate with me. Later on, it talks about Adler was the one who coined the phrase community feeling, and the importance of the role that community plays, the relationship we have with our, our families, the order, the birth order, the part that plays. I mean, I focus less on that because that's a very different thing, but there's so many things that are very human about it all, but it's done beautifully through this conversation by the end of it, because the student's kind of challenging. The philosopher would say something and the student doesn't believe it and then challenges it, and sometimes gets quite upset. But then the philosopher's having to explain and expand and more. Oh no, actually, you're misunderstanding this, and this is another way to see it. So I think it really helps people to see a broader perspective.
It's like a very holistic way of looking at the world, and very,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, I think it's brilliant, and it
yeah.
finishes with this whole kind of view that, look, life is actually just a series of moments, and it's how we
Hmm.
choose to, embrace or respond or react to these moments. I think it's brilliant. It's one of my favorite books reads of the last few years, and like I say, I think it had a profound positive impact on me a couple of years ago. So I've done a talk. I've done it a few. I did it at Agile Scotland last year. Done it in a few other places. So yeah, that definitely one for me. And again, we've
Well,
talked a lot about
you've
conversation.
convinced me to,
Yeah,
well,
well,
the
please
for
read
me,
it. Yeah.
the problem is I have every week I learn about at least one new book,
Yes.
so that's kind of hard.
Yes.
But the way I've done the last couple of years, although I drive a lot less with my car,
Okay.
with trains,
Mm.
a lot of the books, the first is at first, I don't know, the first filtering happens through Audible, listening to a
Yes.
book, and I feel that when I listen to a book, I don't grasp it fully.
Yeah.
So, but for me, it's like, okay, for some books that's enough. Then I know
Mm.
the concepts. I don't read fiction anymore at this point.
I
But
never
so
have.
these, I've done a lot.
Right.
Yeah, of time that I read a lot of fiction, but for me, it's like now I listen to these kind of books, and if there could be books like I said that is interesting enough. I listen to it, and that's fine. But there's a lot of other books that then say like, now I want to know more, and then I'm going to read the book, and so I buy a next copy, which is typically a Kindle book for me because I love
Mm.
much more reading on digital.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, this is, like I said, the first filtering happens in many cases on Audible. So this is the perfect thing for me. If you say it's really wonderful to listen to it because it's a
It is.
conversation,
Yeah.
that's the kind of thing I really like. So yeah,
Good. You've,
um,
you've made me
it it
happy.
it it will it yeah it immediately goes to. I'm pretty sure after this conversation, I will add it to my wish list, and then I can still buy it when. yeah, at the moment that I'm
Uh,
out of books to listen on my
and the next time we meet, I look forward to hearing your reflections on it.
that's well, that's definitely an option. Well, depending on how fast we meet each other, of course. That's another thing.
Can I
You
mention a
still
couple of
want?
other ones quickly?
Yeah,
Would that be
you can
okay?
mention more. I
Yeah,
don't have
it's,
book covers prepared there, but
no,
okay,
no, it's fine.
that's it.
It's a longish list, and as I say, I'll share that link with you where I do actually
Mhm.
talk about. I think I mentioned 10 or 12, and which were influential for me in 2024. But the two I wanted to call it because they're also two of my favorites, and I think they're relevant to this conversation and also to I'd imagine the audience that your videocast podcasts attract. The other one is, we've talked a lot about communication. I'm somebody who really strongly believes in the importance of powerful conversations, right? Conversations that are meaningful, conversations that are real. And I'm a huge fan of agile conversations. So again, some years ago, I had Squirrel and Fred speak on my meetup, and it's a book I continue to pick up time and time again. Um, and again, it's wonderful because it focuses on these 5 conversations. A lot of people know it, but I particularly like the chapter that talks about the fear conversation, because I think in my experiences, certainly when things often aren't going well or we're having challenges, in our family lives or in our teams or in our organization, it's often because things have come from a position of fear, right? I
Mm.
think people still fear change. It's natural, it's understandable, it's very human. And the chapter on the fear conversation is great because it really talks about you've got to get to this point where you can kind of make it safe to explore people's fears. And one of the tools in there is the fear chart, where you're listing your fears and then you're kind of exploring them. And I think it's very cool. But again, as you know, it kind of builds these things up. So before they talk about fear, there's already a chapter exploring the trust conversation. Because how can you get someone to a point where they're happy to talk about their fears, etc., if you haven't built up trust? Right. And I think these are things that are very important tools for, the agile practitioners, the agile coaches, anybody doing any sort of change transformation. A lot of my work is, cultural transformation initiatives. And you've got to, I really believe you have to be very, again, it comes back to the conversation about creativity and art, etc. You have to be very clever about how you create a powerful narrative to help people to see the benefit in these things, right? Just try to understand what you're trying to do and why this would be meaningful and beneficial to them. Which is also why I'm a great fan of social leadership, and I've talked about that
And so
before as well. Yeah,
the
that's
first
it.
book, the
Yes,
Excel book, is the Agile Conversations. That's
yes,
the one I
yes,
just put it up because I love the book as well.
yes. It's a great
This
book.
is one I've read, so yeah, that one
Good.
is. I've read it on Kindle. I don't know if it's existing on paper or in Audible,
Well, did
but
paper it does, yeah, very much so. Paper, definitely paper. There you are.
all right.
So paper it does. Couple of others very, very quickly. So one of my all-time favorites, which again a lot of people know. It's featured.
Nonviolent communication. This is
It's featured in some of
uh,
my talks.
yeah, I would say this is probably the from the non-agile books one of the most quoted book.
Yeah,
And in this case, the agile books, there's a lot more that people
yeah,
always keep talking. But yeah, the non-violent communication is
yeah.
definitely
So
a
so
big hit.
yeah. So the reason I come back to it a lot and use it because it actually, I think I would say it changed my life, because later on in the book there's a chapter where it talks about cultural conditioning and how we're programmed a certain way from quite a young age. A lot of us have these influences. But one of the things it talks about, and I do firmly believe, which I think is very much in my being, is that we can liberate ourselves from our cultural conditioning, and that's why I also believe that not only can we learn things, and many of us are what we would call active learners, lifelong learners, but we also have to learn to unlearn, right? And that's
That's the
kind of
hardest part.
it
Learning
is, right?
something new is easy, but
Yeah.
unlearning something, and especially, well, if you talk about cultural things, typically that's learned at a very young age or
Yes,
at a long period when you're born or until the moment you start to unlearn it,
that's
which
right.
is typically many decades.
Yeah.
And then unlearning it is really, really hard.
But that
And
comes through, like you were saying earlier, that it comes through that journey of greater self-awareness. So you build that, right? And then you go, oh, why did I do that? Why am, and we do certain things that we have bad habits because the reality is they were programmed into us through the early influences in our lives. And then we have to work very, very hard to unlearn these things.
yeah, and I think, well, with self-awareness for me, it's also a lot with coaches and therapists and whatever, people helping us to, yeah, to learn to reflect on ourselves, I would say.
Yes,
um,
beautifully said.
it's something that well, I at least needed many people to help me out with unpackaging some of the messages I got from yeah, from my youth, let's put it like that,
Same.
or from the very first companies I worked with, because that was, or from my school or whatever.
Mm.
Many different kind of things that we've learned at some point. That leaves me coming to, for me, the one of the most interesting questions, and especially with conversations like this going in all kind of directions. What's a question do you think that I should also ask you, and
That's a that's a
what's the
toughie.
answer?
That's a
I
toughie.
know.
You're definitely good at the questions. So one of the things that, so I think the question that I guess I get asked, and I think it would be good to explore is, as you can see from the work that I do and anything I'm doing online, that I'm hugely passionate about the role and the opportunities that community presents. Why
Hmm,
is that?
that's a tough question.
So that's the question. And again, if your conversation was 4 hours, I think we still only scratched the surface.
So do you have any idea? Do you have any
Yeah,
answer to this?
well, I don't know about answers as such. I mean, I have views and I have experience because a key aspect of what I do is I help to build communities. But again, I don't like the word build, because I favor more terms like nurture. And one of the things that I'm really passionate about is the fact that communities are just spaces we can create, but if we create them the right way, and what I mean by that is through a kind of genuine passion for what that community's aim or purpose might be, then it can be successful. Also, communities are spaces where we could truly learn things that perhaps or become aware of things that we can't in other environments. So that's why I'm such a big fan of social leadership. And again, it's a book I probably would talk about, but we could go on and on because I learned a lot about that and I studied it and I did some talks around it to help others because there's a great opportunity to get the balance between the traditional corporate type messages and the ones that happen in these informal spaces, which might land more because perhaps in some ways they could potentially be more authentic. And I think great communities have that sort of authentic feel because they've kind of evolved and grown in a certain way. But people go there because also there's some value for them. They feel connected in some way. And ultimately, all of us are really social beings and we're longing for connection and a sense of belonging. Where do we belong? Right. So I've done another talk which is called I think it's called is it called the sense of belonging or the power of belonging, something like that. I'm going to cheat here and throw you another book, but you might tell me off. Is this? I would. This is book I love. Designing for belonging, and again, it's really gets into the heart of community and the different ways that communities kind of evolve from when they're kind of started. How do you encourage people to come into communities? How are they welcomed in? What does that look like? How do you create the spaces for them to participate and contribute? If you do that in the right way, they do. If you don't, clearly, they're not going to feel like they can. I'm not a fan of the phrase safe space, but you get the idea, right? Is it a safe space? But it kind of takes you on that kind of journey. But I think we have some of our most beautiful moments as humans in whatever communities we belong to or are part of. And we do because we feel that sense of belonging. So that's why I'm so passionate about the role
And I
and
think
potential and power of community.
and I think the fact that you stress so much on belonging or designing for belonging,
Yeah.
I think it was apparent in the way yeah, the that online community was created some years ago. The
Mm.
fact that it really felt like, hey, this is for everybody. Like you said, they were not just people from the US or from Europe, but it was like it was global, and really this is something I heard many times. Maybe people didn't always use the word belonging, but
Yeah.
actually that was what they were saying. Like this really felt like my community, and it's online at the moment that we were all looking like, well, yeah, we can't, we're stuck. Well, not sure if we're really stuck still at home, but still, it was a moment like, how do we reconnect with our local community? And all of a sudden, there was that international event where at the moment that I wasn't ready to go to the United States or to other
Mm.
countries, I was like, I'm not sure how safe it is on a physical level at that level.
Mm.
And it really felt like, hey, this has been designed to belong here. Um, and yeah, maybe wasn't, well, I don't know. It was by people who cared so much about the community that I felt that I belonged there. So yeah.
We had a phrase, and the phrase was everyone means everyone.
Mm, look there. Yeah.
Yeah, because to me, and a lot of my work is also in the kind of diversity inclusion kind of space. And I was lucky enough to do the closing keynote at Scotland Diversity Conference a couple of years ago. And one of the things I do like to emphasize is I think, you know, we have to work hard to create inclusivity because it's only through inclusion we can then have diversity. And I'm not
Right.
sure that's how everybody kind of sees that. That's how I see it, rightly or wrongly. You start with inclusion. If you create the kind of environments that are inclusive and you get inclusion, by then being inclusive, you've created greater diversity, and then that's when you can tap into the potential of diversity of thought and all these other wonderful things that
Mhm.
diverse groups give us, right?
I really like that. It's really, yeah, it's this kind of things that pop up and that you feel even if you don't know it. Again, I wasn't part of of the people who created it, but it radiates. That whole event radiated that, and that's, I really see that also. And yeah, what I've learned about being part of other communities that try to be inclusive is that by being inclusive to people who need a certain whatever, it actually helps a lot of other people who might not need it, but who actually value that there is place for others, and who value like, hey, I can, this is interesting for me as well. And so that is something that, yeah, that usually is very helpful. Sometimes there is a little bit backlash on people saying, "Yeah, this
Mm.
is against the normal people, whatever and whoever that
Well,
are." I don't think
whoever they are.
exactly. I don't think. Yeah, I always, yeah, use statistics to say like normal people that doesn't exist. The normal in Belgium, the normal wife has 1.3 children. I don't know anyone who has 1.3 children, but that just doesn't exist. So
Yep.
statistically, normal is just a very strange thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's basically the majority. But it's creating environment for people who are not that majority. Actually, in many cases, or in most cases, help the majority as well.
Mm.
It's not against. It's creating that bigger pie, I would say.
Yes. Wonderful.
So really wonderful. It was a hard question, and I'm sure we can still talk about that for hours and hours. And I'll leave that for another bar conversation next time we meet.
I look forward to it.
And that definitely something that we would include other people, because I think
Yes,
that's even more interesting for these kind of questions. Let's and talking about other people, who do you think that I should ask next as well? And I know that you have quite a big list of people that you
I
wanted me to
do.
talk
I
about.
do. Again, I think it's
Let me,
quite
I because it's a large list, I'm going to do it a little bit different, because
all right.
otherwise I will have to always find the pictures with who you're talking about. So
Right.
let's turn it around. I'm going to show you pictures and then you have to tell me who it is. And the
Okay.
first one is immediately the hardest, because I don't think it's a real picture of the person,
Oh,
but
okay.
you might recognize who that person used on
Love
his
that.
LinkedIn page.
So yes, that's obviously Morpheus for any film watchers out there from the Matrix. So that's Nana Aban, and
Mhm.
again, what I've tried to do here with the list that I've suggested is to then be true to my values around inclusion and diversity, and the people I'm suggesting and inviting to your wonderful podcast is people across geographical different geographical locations, folk of different kind of backgrounds, ethnicities, and also folk who are in different places where I've physically done talks. So that was kind of my criteria. So Nana is he's a wonderful human. He is the founder of the Agile in Africa conference. And again, I got to know him through the Agile 20 Reflect Festival, because he worked closely with myself and others who were part of the organising team. Did great work to help connect many across Africa with what we were doing, and we built a lot of great relationships. And he invited me 2 years ago to do one of the keynotes at Agile Africa. So that would have been 20 Agile in Africa 2023. And I think it would be a fabulous conversation because Dana is a really interesting guy. So I think you two would have a fabulous conversation.
I hope so too. What already with that discussion, I think it is. Let's bring that next person on. Who's this?
Well, that's Kuhn. That's Kuhn.
Hmm.
Last month, and Kuhn again has become a good friend. You know Kuhn because we would have met Kuhn, and
Yeah,
yeah, you know him well, right? So
yeah.
he's in your part of the world. But again, I
He's in
met
my part of the
Kuhn.
world.
Yeah, I met Kuhn in Agile 20 Reflect. We met a few times. He came to Scotland for Agile, Lean Agile Scotland a couple of years ago. And when we were in XP Benelux last year, he took a few of us out and showed us Michelin. And he's another awesome human. So I think that would be a great conversation. And I like a lot of the games and things that
Yeah, I was
he
about to say
creates.
he's creates
Yeah.
a lot of games, first
Yes.
typically online and then physically, and
Yes.
actually busy writing a book right now. I don't know
He
if
is.
you're
I'm very aware of that. Yes.
So yeah, very
Excellent. Yes.
interesting topic. Unfortunately, because of this podcast, I don't have enough time to help him reviewing. I'm part of the reviewers, but I'm not that good in reviewing it as
Well,
I'm used to
I
be.
am
Uh,
in that group, but I'm not sure I'm making a particularly good job of it at the moment. So I need to up my game, and I've just said it live on air now.
Well, yeah, and for me it's the same thing. It's like the things I've read is already like I really should spend more time on the book. So if you hear this, Koen, the promise as well, I should make more time on this as well. So let's move on that next person, and who is, and of course I should show it on the screen. Who is this person?
So that's Suzanne.
Hmm.
Suzanne Lagervige. I'm not sure I pronounced this. Again, somebody's become a really good friend. Was also in Benelux. She actually did a wonderful workshop which explored an aspect of what was covered in the Agile Conversations book. I was also been at our conference in Scotland. We met at XP in Amsterdam a few years prior. Again, lots of great things going on, doing wonderful work. I think it would be a fabulous conversation. And so,
Yeah, she's been on my invitation list, I think, right from the start. At the moment, it
okay,
was less than 50 people. It's
okay,
700. I just checked this evening. It's 736 people right now. So
that's a big backlog.
that's a lot of people to invite and to talk to. I'm pretty sure I will never go to the end, so I never promise that I will talk to everybody. It's just based on how quick people are reacting.
True.
And so far, I've again taken the promise that I will, yeah, I want to do these conversations until the end of the year, and then I'll decide again. That
Good for you.
that's something I want to decide every year, and I know every half year my partner then asks, "Are you sure you still want to finish up another part?" But like here, this gives me a lot of energy talking to people like you
Hmm.
and Susanna and others. And so, which are the others? Because we said it was a big list. So, who's that person to talk
So
to?
this is Shelby. This is Shelby Wilson, another good friend of mine. And again, Shelby was actually part of our core team doing Agile 20
Hmm.
Reflect. So when if Shelby ends up listening to tuning into this, I'm sure that will put a smile on her face. So yeah, Shelby, good friend. She's in Wales, doing great work in the automotive industry.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, yes, I think that could be an interesting one because I don't think you perhaps or most of us speak to folk who are trying to do agile transformations in that kind of arena. So that could be good. And as I say, she's a good friend and she's a lot of fun. So I think you would we've
That
had many a
that's
good time in conferences in the bar.
well, yeah. That's of course that is what I prefer. I don't want people to invite boring people. So far, I never had that, but
I would be thoroughly disappointed with myself if I did that.
but I didn't know Shelby. Neither do I know the next person. Who's this?
So that's Fred Dichler. So I met Fred. So Fred's in Oregon, I think. So Fred is. I met Fred last year at the Agile in Ireland conference in Cork. So he and I both spoke there. I didn't know him, but I knew of him, and I think
Mhm.
we were connected on LinkedIn, and I know a lot of other people who knew him, but I never met him. But yeah, I think he would also be very interesting. I think he's been in the agile space a long time. He's a very active contributor to the community. He's been speaking for some years, and we had a great time getting to know each other in Ireland last year. So I think he would be good. And again, as I said, I was keen to cover the sorts of different parts of the world where I've spoken. So, at the very
And
least,
that
wanted to do mainland Europe, Africa, and the US. So there you are.
that's definitely something I really appreciate. And let's bring that said, let's bring that last person. And this is actually another person that was on my list and was already invited, but really hard to get. So let's make
Oh,
the
April!
case for why should
I
I have
forgot.
indeed
Well,
April?
so April I've known for a few years, and again met her and got to know her through the Agile 20 Reflect Festival. She was one of our patrons. I also co-hosted one of her open spaces with her some years ago and had a beautiful experience. I think she's one of the genuinely for me one of the best at creating an open, relaxed, welcoming space. She does it brilliantly. And I haven't heard from her in quite a long time. Occasionally see things online, and again, I think it would be a very, you know, human, insightful, fun conversation. I mean, April's lots of fun. And I've never met her in person, so I hope to address that at some point. But yeah, April Jefferson, absolutely.
Yeah, I've already I invited her before everybody somebody talked, and then I had both Diana and William Larson both inviting her, telling hey she would be a really good person. Then who was it? Lila,
Mm.
Rao
Yes,
again,
yeah,
and
yeah,
now
well,
you. So yeah, April, really many people want you on the show, be included. So I really hope that she does indeed find the time. But like she said right on my very first invitation, that
mm,
she is a very busy person. So
she
yeah,
is, she is.
I'm not surprised that we couldn't find the right moment at this very time.
Well,
So that's
I'll
the
do
other
my
thing
best
is
to
that
nudge as well.
that would be really wonderful if you can, well, send an introduction to some of these people. because I know it helps with many people as
Will do.
well. So, well, Sathpal, it's been a really wonderful conversation. We said it's we had scheduled for 2 hours. You said, well, I'm not sure, depending on how talkative I am. Well, we didn't do full 2 hours, but still we're close, I would say.
Mm,
Um, the so really thankful for your time. If
appreciate it.
people
Thanks for the
want to
opportunity.
connect to you, what would be a good way to connect with you?
Oh, phew, I'm very active on social across channels. The best way to connect with me is LinkedIn, really, because I'm very active there. Given all of
That's the
my
one
yeah
that I
yeah
have.
yeah my various other voluntary pursuits and all the community stuff that I get involved in, that's the best way to connect with me. I'm still on, well, Twitter X as we call it now, but I'm not as active there. But I still have an online presence there. I've also started to move to Bluesky, so people can find me on Bluesky. And if they are interested in seeing more of some of the visuals and stuff that I've done before, I'm on Instagram, so I have a visual Sath channel on Instagram. So they're probably the best places to reach me. But LinkedIn primarily, because I'm more active there than I am anywhere else. In fact, I'd say online I live on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I understand the part about not being active anymore on X. Actually, I also still have an account, but I actually only use it these days for the tools. There are a couple of tools, or one tool that I use
Mm,
primarily to move accounts from Twitter to Blue Sky, and so therefore I need to keep my Twitter account, so I keep running it from time to time to find new people on Blue Sky. So indeed, that's a kind of way to keep it around, but I'm not actively posting anymore on X, except maybe for all the things have been scheduled for a long time ago to be scheduled in a year later. And so that might still be active things on X, but for the rest, I'm not doing that anything more. So yeah, that's really well, it was a wonderful conversation. I
pleasure.
didn't expect anything else, but I'm happy to see that it still gave me lots of energy. And again, lots of things to think about, books to read, people to talk with, but also future conversations between the two of us. So thank
Yes,
you
for
very much
sure.
for your time.
Thank
Thanks
you for
again.
watching
Enjoyed it.
Who's
Thank you.
Agile, where the stories of agilists come to life. I hope you liked today's interview. Subscribe if you're not subscribed and want to get to know other agilists.